So, the Game Awards just happened, and against my better judgment, I watched them live. Could have used less Hoyoverse trailers, but hey, it was a pretty good show with some fascinating announcements. Statler and Waldorf mentioned Hideo Kojima, and fun was had by all. There's one announcement in particular I want to talk about today, the newest entry in a franchise that's been dormant almost as long as I've been alive. Onimusha, The Way of the Sword. Was it my favorite announcement of the night? That's gotta be Okami. Hell yeah. But it's definitely an awesome surprise, and I have some history with Onimusha on this channel, so I felt obliged to talk about it tonight in a shorter, more topical video, going over why it's such a big deal, as well as some of my hopes for the new entry. I've been working on my next video for a while, that's a much bigger project, so I'll get the shorter one out in the meantime. It should be a real treasure. Also, I can't sleep at all tonight, so I'm writing to tire myself out. That's certainly part of it as well. Onimusha is an early example of a character action game, and one with a ton of history in the genre. It was made under Capcom, who is also responsible for Devil May Cry, and Onimusha has had a big influence on that series. For example, the mechanic of juggling enemies was first conceptualized in Onimusha, meaning the concept of combos in a hack and slash game was Onimusha's doing. That's a big deal. Devil May Cry ended up quite a bit more successful than Onimusha, and even got a revival of its own, but that was 5 years ago. The first Onimusha game, Onimusha Warlords, released in early 2001, and it was the best-selling PlayStation 2 game at one point. GTA quickly took that spot, but hey, best-selling game on the best-selling console is still nothing to scoff at. For a time it seemed like Onimusha was going to be one of Capcom's bigger franchises, but sales lowered down, and it was overshadowed by other titles. It's only their 10th biggest franchise now. I've always found it strange how Onimusha doesn't have the same cult following as classic Capcom games that technically had more success then, like Darkstalkers or Dino Crisis, and it was pretty forgotten by Capcom themselves. It didn't even appear in Marvel vs. Capcom, ever. Knowing that, it's really nice to see this series come back. I always love companies reviving older franchises like this, because I'm not of the opinion that series need consistent releases to be good. And even the idea that companies need to acknowledge franchises consistently, I don't really agree with. That said, having their ideas and gameplay be expanded upon is really cool, and fans being happy is good too. A while ago, Capcom released a remaster of Onimusha Warlords for PS4, which underperformed heavily. That made me pretty skeptical of the series ever coming back, especially with the failure of the Netflix show. A lot of companies seem to have this idea of testing the waters, with stuff like remakes or remasters, to see if there's any potential in future releases. An easy remaster like that made me feel that's what Capcom was doing, and it's a practice I really don't like. Usually people won't buy those types of games because they're a smaller release. If Onimusha The Way of the Sword succeeds, it can prove that way of thinking has flaws, and I would like to see Capcom give other ideas a chance. Similarly, usually when Capcom brings back older series, it's with a remake or collection. Capcom's been getting pretty crazy with it lately, and while I appreciate it, I'm not the biggest remake guy. Sometimes a sequel is best. You don't even need that big of a budget for it usually. They did make Devil May Cry 5 though, that's not a remake. I almost feel like it was a way safer kiss than Onimusha. It's part of a more successful series overall. Not denying how big a deal it was, of course. Actually, seeing sequels instead of just remakes all the time could set a good precedent as well, and I mean, lots of people were asking a remake of Onimusha just because the sequel seemed so out of the question. Onimusha, The Way of the Sword is a big deal, and it's got a lot to carry on, needing to build attention back to this waning series, and needing to stand out in a world that's much different than 2001. And look, I'm not some Onimusha superfan, but when I saw that gauntlet absorbing demon souls, I instantly knew, holy shit, they're doing this? So what should this game actually do? What are my hopes and expectations for it? I want to beg Capcom for something a little. Look, I don't know if you're planning on making a hack and slash game or more of a Souls-like, but please do something to set it apart from, say, Neo or any other Koei Tecmo game set in Japan with demons that was probably inspired by Onimusha. Just from a casual audience's perspective, it might be hard for this game to stand out among those types of games, and in a market with more games similar to it. Some of the demon designs look really creepy, so I like the idea of Onimusha the Way of the Sword emphasizing that. Make it a darker, creepier game with a heavy atmosphere like the first Onimusha. That first game was also originally a Resident Evil spin-off, so it had puzzle elements and was set in and around one castle. That could be an angle to take as well. Bring in some puzzle elements, emphasize one physical location and its story, and maybe this could be to Onimusha what Resident Evil 7 was to Resident Evil. I don't really have too many expectations, to be honest. I just hope Capcom can do something unique here. If you haven't played Onimusha before, I hope you can understand why this revival is a big deal, and why Onimusha deserves to be discussed as part of Capcom's history, alongside the big franchises like Devil May Cry. And if you have already played it, what a surprise, huh? I'm glad my previous Onimusha video is horribly out of date. And who knows, maybe if this is a success, we can get Onimusha Blade Warriors 2. Blade Warrior Sweep! If you've got hopes for Onimusha The Way of the Sword or other Capcom series you want back, I'd love to hear about those in the comments as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later. Once we find out more information about Okami's sequel in like 5 years, I can gush like this, but with 10 times more enthusiasm about Okami's revival as well.